wide family where alcoholism was just spread throughout. I had no idea the effect it had on me. Emotional ability to regulate my emotions. I had no idea what emotions even were. As a kid growing up in chaos, I learned to survive. And any emotion I had, I couldn't tell mom, couldn't talk to my dad. I had no one to talk to, so you stuffed them. I just stuffed everything down. A coping mechanism, I guess you would say, with life is not to say anything. And this followed me through life. And I had no idea that I was living my life as a survivor.
What happens when trauma isn't just yours, but inherited? On this episode of Beyond the Window, clinical directors Carla Fernandez and Jennifer Enriquez join La Ventana president and CEO Steve Zamarripa as they dive into generational trauma, how it shapes us, how to break its grip, and why healing isn't just personal, it's legacy work. From family silence to transformative recovery, this is the conversation you won't want to miss.
Welcome to Beyond the Window. My name is Carla Fernandez. Obviously, as you all know, I am a licensed clinical social worker and a clinical director with La Ventana Treatment Programs.
Well, welcome, and thank you for having me here. This is my first podcast, and I am the owner of La Ventana. We've been in business for about 17, 18 years. I'm not sure quite what. I'm here just to discuss the topic and let people know why La Ventana was started and what a great experience I received from it.
Yeah. And I'm Jennifer Enriquez. I'm a clinical director here at La Ventana and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And, you know, part of why I prompted specifically us three to talk about this, one, because it's like a passion of mine to talk about generational trauma. And I know Carla, you know, kind of it's been a passion of yours, mixing in the cultural piece as well. And then Steve, you know, kind of hearing some of your story of, you know, why La Ventana was founded and what was that inspiration of that huge shift in your career. And so if you don't mind, maybe you could start off with that of why you're passionate about generational trauma and, you know, addiction and why you started La Ventana.
Well, I grew up in a family with alcoholism. I had many cousins, many uncles, aunts, wide family where alcoholism was just spread throughout. I had no idea the effect it had on me, the emotional ability to regulate my emotions. I had no idea what emotions even were. As a kid growing up in chaos, spending a lot of time with my father next to the wheel, drunk, driving on the wrong side, going to places that were not appropriate for kids, I learned to survive. And any emotion I had, I couldn't tell mom, couldn't talk to my dad, I had no one to talk to, so you stuffed them. I just stuffed everything down, and this coping mechanism, I guess you would say, with life, is not to say anything, not to create waves, try to be as invisible as much, and just kind of get along with the program and be a good boy. And this followed me through life. And I had no idea that I was living my life as a survivor, as they say. And one day I went through a awakening, and I was in a different business, which was making good money, but there was something missing inside. And so I sold it, and I took a year off, and I did retreats and therapy and yoga and all kinds of stuff. And I found my way into this, I guess, industry where you help people who suffered the same way I did. So I started about 17, 18 years ago, not knowing what a therapist was, not knowing what generational trauma was, not even knowing that I was affected personally on my relationships with people, how I dealt with people, how I dealt with the world as a whole. And so it's been a learning process for me for the past 17 years. But basically, the reason it was started is I felt something was missing. And this was a way to give back and to help other people. And I opened up. I had no idea who to hire, but I put ads out, and the world just provided these great people like Jen and Carla, therapists who do their magic with the clients. And I leave them alone. I don't bug them. They do their thing. And it's very fulfilling, and I'm really happy that I did this.
Yeah. It's such a gift. I know, like, I try my best to update you because you get, I'm sure, bogged down with all of the, BS in your position and the bills and the insurance and the lawyers and the da-da-da. That I try my best to really give you messages from the clients of, like, what they're doing and how it's helping them and the thank yous from the families. And I try to pass that up to you as much as I can because that's really why at the end of the day, you're, like, doing all of this, and I think we see it every day, all the time. Yeah. And I think that really fuels, like, why we do what we do. In fact, I've told you many times over the last 10 years, like, I can't believe you pay me to do this. So I keep paying me, but I can't believe I get paid to do this. Like, what a gift. Yeah. And I touched a lot of that with, like, I talked about, the shame and trauma with Bryce. It's like this piece of what a gift to be able to be part of this. But you don't get that every day.
No, I don't.
And it really is such an impact. Like, think over 17 years, I would lose track of how many clients and families. And when we talk about the generations that are impacted, I mean, it's going to be sort of that, if you were to drop a rock into a pond and all of the waves that start created from that, it's like, that's you. Like, you created that initial wave, and the impact that has caused from that is endless. And so we get that every day.
Yeah. Well, I do get the gratitude notes that come from clients, and people will come visit us after 2 or 3 years. Yeah. People come and say hi. The alumni program is very active. A perfect example is I was at a funeral maybe a year and a half ago. My brother-in-law died of cancer. And I was just sitting there at the gravesite, and some woman out of nowhere came up to me, and she goes, "Are you Steve from La Ventana?" I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Thank you. You saved my son's life."
Yeah.
You can't put a value on that. And it was just, it blew me away. I didn't know what to say. But things like that, and it's happened several times to me throughout this career. And that is enough to make you come back to work the next day. It's just amazing what you guys do as therapists to save people's lives. Yeah. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think that was a beautiful comparison. Just kind of like the rippling effect and what it allows us to do with our hopes and dreams, and kind of like what we have also gone through and how it is rewarding for us. Like, even just hearing you, like, speak about your family, there's a lot of similarities already. Where I'm like, oh, do we have the same family? But, I come from, like, first and foremost, a really long line of just, like, really resilient, hardworking, like, humble people. I will say that. But I think, like, in that same breath, it comes with a lot of the alcoholism, a lot of, like, the mental health illnesses. And I think before I even knew what was going on, I felt it. Like, I felt it. I was always the kid that was, like, struggling with something, and I was like, why? Like, what is going on for me, And I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what mental health was. I didn't know how to talk about it. We don't talk about it. Like, that's kind of like that cultural piece, that messaging of, like, leave it alone. You don't bring it up. And so I think, like, in that same token, it allowed me to unfortunately crash into, like, a few walls because I was taught to. And then I was like, okay, this isn't working, and having to really maneuver that on my own and kind of, like, delve into therapy. And I've been in therapy since I was younger, but doing it for myself and realizing, like, why I needed it, and then discovering, like, wait, holy crap, like, this actually didn't start with me. Like, this actually was passed down to me. Like, a lot of, like, the beautiful and amazing traits that I've been passed down that I cherish and I hold with pride, there's also a lot on the other end that I'm like, oh, that's where I get it from. And I think being able to, first and foremost, like, educate our families on that too is such, like, it's such a gift. And I think that goes back to, like, the rewarding piece, because it's kind of like, obviously you did all of your studying and you got your master's and you did your graduate program. So you have all of, like, the knowledge, but then you have, like, this personal piece, and it's like, you combine it and it's like, I have the answers, like, I want to give them to you. Get it, run with it, like, this is what it is. And then you kind of see them start to understand themselves, and that, I would say, is huge for me. Like, they don't blame themselves as much. I think they start to understand, like, I'm not just, like, this broken person. A lot of this is, like, genetically I'm predisposed to it, or just all I know, all I've seen. How do I do any different? And then just kind of, like, aligning those tools for them is huge.
Yeah, and it takes, I love that you talked about that blame piece, right? Because I think when we do these things like genograms and it's like a family tree, but then it's a little bit more of like the characteristics and who are the people within my system. And I'll tell them, I'm like, I don't even have to know your family. I don't have to know your diagnosis. I don't have to know anything about you. I can guarantee you, you're not going to be the only one with some sort of characteristic or color on your genogram. It doesn't just come in a vacuum and it's just me by myself, right? And then I just have all of this stuff come out. It's somewhere. And so sometimes it's opening up those discussions, and now we're having families say more authentically what was going on. That maybe we try to hide from you, even though we picked it up as kids. I mean, we all have that feeling where we can go back to of like, be quiet, or what am I watching, or this doesn't feel safe, and so I just learned to stuff it down. And so now it's like, that's what that was. I didn't know, or maybe I wasn't told to talk about it. And so now we're having these conversations of like, it's not just you, and that burden comes off of them. And so now it's like this piece of, okay, now I have the awareness of what it is. Now what do I do with this? Right? And so that's where like the therapy within family systems and within individual work starts coming into play of like, how do I break this generational transmission? Right? And
that's good. But I think what Carla was talking about too also is that growing up as a child, your emotional, I guess, ability to deal with your emotions is developed from 0 to 8 and a little bit on. Now, if you're in a family system where there is no emotional guidance, there is no method to treat with your emotions, you just become silent. There were many times as a little kid I was at places I shouldn't have been. I was at my father's girlfriend's house with a bunch of drunken people running around. I'm sitting there in my Cub Scout uniform, not knowing what to do. So you just freeze almost. And you spend a lot of your life frozen because you don't understand what you're suffering from. And you think this is life. This is the way life is. It's
such a norm.
Yeah.
Like, you just so, because on the other end, right, there is this side where you just like shut down. And I think I had both types of parents. I had like the emotionally like really absent father that was very much where I would like shut down and like, we just don't talk about it. Okay. Like, I guess I'm not asking any questions and this is weird, but like, okay, whatever, or like, this isn't normal. I shouldn't not know the last time I held a conversation with you, like this is not the dynamic that I think it should be, but that's my norm. That's all I know. And then you have, or like in my case, my mom who had lots of emotions did not know how to regulate them. So then you see kind of both of
the
them.
extremes.
And then that's all you know. So then you're just kind of like, okay, this is normal. This is it. And you don't know how to deal with it, and you deal with it in ways that you're seeing. And again, passing down, right? Like they learn that likely from either their circumstances, their traumas, and their hardships. And they go with it because that's all they know. And then that's what they're teaching you. And then that's what so at some point someone is like, okay, this is like not working.
Takes generations.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
So
what is going on?
We can't sit and blame our parents, because I look at my parents, and their parents were not emotional available. They had no idea.
How are they supposed to know?
My father, him and his brothers kicked their father out of the house when they became teenagers because he was such a mess. So they were not emotionally present. They were not able to offer guidance. So it just passes on to the next person. If you don't learn that as a kid, how are you going to learn it as an adult?
Right.
And I always say, if there was a program like this when I was in my 20s and I had gone to it, my life would have been a lot different. Relationships, family, everything would have been different. So it's passed on, but when you live it and you have this trauma, you don't even know you have the trauma. Right. And it's just, that's just the way you live. I react sometimes too quick. I stuff things down. I'm not that communicative, and it's present. And even with my own children, who I love beyond the greatest thing, emotionally, I don't think I was there for them during their tough years. They didn't have someone who was present, and that passed on. And now they are pretty healthy. They've actually come to me as adults and said, Dad, you weren't there for us. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea, and it was shocking. But you go to therapy, you do your stuff, and you realize that it's not your fault.
I think
it's not
Well,
your
that's
fault.
that book that you talked about of like, it didn't start with you, right?
Yeah,
And that's that
exactly.
whole conversation.
And you don't even know it's in you.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I just want to highlight, like, what a gift, because what your kids were able to do to you of like, I'm sharing openly and honestly my experience with you, Dad, and you took it instead of defending it or like, that's not what it was.
Yeah.
Could you have had that conversation with your dad?
Never.
Right?
I didn't have a conversation like that.
They got to have that conversation
you're already
with
breaking
you.
cycles.
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And then the whole love thing, I think a lot of people my generation, their parents never said they loved them.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I bring this up in conversation with my wife, with friends, and everybody's like, no, my dad never told me he loved them, And same thing with me. I don't even know what love was. It was like, oh, I'm in this house. I can't invite my friends over because it's chaos. So you're alone a lot, to some isolation, and you have trouble with being a loving person because you're not really sure what it is. I knew my dad and my mom loved me, but the expression wasn't there.
I think even though transgenerational trauma obviously is often seen as like such a burden and something that's like so hard and we pass these things down, right? I also feel like for me it was really a huge gift, and I try to, or learning about it, I guess I will say, and I try to like also reframe that for my clients because it allowed me to gain empathy. A lot from my parents, like a lot from my parents. And not that I was ever like this angry or hateful kid or adolescent or young adult, but obviously there's some, inherent rage that you have of like, why is this going on? Why are you like this? Like, why are we like this?
But you are upset initially.
Yeah, absolutely.
It gets to the point almost hatred for your parents
but
until
then
you understand that they were just parents.
Exactly.
And they didn't have a book.
Like, it's their
and no one
first
taught them.
time living.
Exactly.
They also just had really crappy circumstances, and this is literally all they know. And that's often what we tell our clients, like, if they knew better, they would be doing better. I promise you that. Right? So it's like if this is all they're giving you, it's probably the best that they have. Or there's like that shame piece, right? The best that they think that they can give you, or, self-sabotage. And there's all of these different kind of like dynamics that come into it, right? But I think in that sense, it allowed me to understand my parents a whole lot, and then kind of disarmed me a bit, because I was like, okay, so if I really think about this generationally, I think about the fact that my mom didn't have parents, and that her, like, and then even we talk about culture, right? Like, okay, so my parents are born and raised in Mexico, a different world, like, completely, right? And then they migrated here, and then, just unfortunately, like, abuse and neglect and all of these things that kind of play into it, and it results into alcoholism, and then there goes my generation down the drain, right? Like, where it's like, we don't get the parents that we want. And it's tough, but then now, like, seeing it full circle, right? Like, as a therapist doing my work, I'm like so proud of my parents. Like, my dad, for example, I'll share a little bit about him. Again, I mentioned like very emotionally absent father growing up. I really don't remember having conversations with him when I was little, like, at all, unless we were in trouble. Like, if something was wrong, it was like, okay, your dad is going to get here. But like, I don't remember having conversations with him like, how's your day? How's it going? Like, never. And he was physically there. Like, my dad was a hustler, right? Like, he's working, he's here, he's present, he's providing, but never a conversation, right? And surprisingly, it wasn't something that I had to speak to him about. I feel like I was always the one that was like, we're talking about it. I'm not leaving this by myself. Like, I will not deal with these emotions alone. You guys are all coming down with me. But my dad actually struggled with addiction his whole life. And then I think he hit a few walls. And then he finally got to the point where I was like, I am so done with this wall. Like, I am so done. And he went to, like, the 12-step programs, and he went to therapy, and he did all of these things on his own. And then he came and made amends with us and, like, did that work on his own. And he basically said that. He was like, listen, I didn't know what I was doing. I provided to you what I was provided. And that's
a lot of that is societal too, because if I look back at my dad, a lot of that generation came back from World War II.
Yeah.
If you're in a war, you're traumatized.
Yeah.
There was no therapy, there was no PTSD. They just went right to work and started. Yeah. And so their trauma, their PTSD was passed on to their children because they didn't know how to regulate. But the society for men, if we go back not that far, but when I was growing up, is the strong, silent type. Yeah. The Gary Cooper, the John Wayne. I remember growing up and being at a family function, and one of my cousins was crying, and his mother came over and slapped him and said, "Boys don't cry. And boys don't do this. You have to be a man. Pull yourself up in your bootstraps and just go through it."
Don't see anything.
And that is what a lot of my generation lived with. My father's generation was even worse, that they had no emotional outlet, and even to talk about it would seem weak. Honestly, before I got into the program, into this business, I thought people who went to therapy were weak. And I thought alcoholism was weak. They can just get over it. You don't realize there is a underlying factor from your family, your society, and everything that causes a lot of these behaviors that are not healthy.
And there goes like that predisposition, right? Because even in the book that you were mentioning that I was letting you know, like I've read, and just even things that we've talked about before in terms of how in this book, it didn't start with you. They start to illustrate, like obviously research, and like it's research based what they're finding. And so if we look at it like in that, what you just mentioned, right? Like if we go back to people having had to go through the war and they had PTSD, and then their kids, and then their kids, and then their kids, right? Let's say we have someone that did not participate, unfortunately, went to war, and then they had a child, right? What is it called? It's called like a germ egg, like the egg before they even actually like do the deed and plant the egg and the whole thing happens is already predisposed to like a genetic tag. So epigenetics, right? Like characteristics, not just physical characteristics, but like your emotions and your behaviors and how you deal with things is already kind of getting mixed for you. So let's say that gentleman gets married. They have a kid. That child will already be born ready to like fight. Like they're ready to survive. They come into this world out of the womb with the tools that are, resilience in a lot of ways, with the tools that the dad at the war had, but it's incongruent to their environment, right? It's like, you don't need that here, but you're already born scared. You're already born weary. You're born anxious. You're born kind of like, what's going on? I need to be already like watching out and hypervigilant for what's going to happen for me. That's not even my reality. That's not even what I'm going through. And I can speak to myself. Like I was always a really anxious child. Always. I can remember being like 5 and 6 and like praying for who knows what. Just hard because I was so anxious that something was going to happen, and I like didn't know. And like my family, like we were good back then, like it was fine, I guess, for me, but I was always so anxious, and I'm like, why? Right now, if I really think about what my parents had gone through and what their parents had gone through and what they were going through when I was in the womb and what I was born into, it makes total sense that I was born with this hyper alert, hypervigilance, worry. Something bad is always going to happen. I always have to protect myself. There always is something bad waiting for me. I don't deserve good things. Good things don't really happen to me for no reason. And I thought like, okay, but I'm carrying someone else's message. Truthfully, we don't just come in as like a blank slate. You come in with already like little predisposed things that either fire off given your experiences or they don't, right? And for me, it was something that did fire off, and then that trailed into a whole different kind of like can of worms that I opened up. But there was always like, I genuinely feel there was always something that I felt I was carrying, like that wasn't genuinely mine. Like I'm just like, there's always a sense of uneasiness that again wasn't always mine. And again, that's why learning and going through this and doing therapy was such a gift, because I was able to be like, oh, hold on, holy crap, like this makes a lot of sense. And then giving that again to our clients, it's like we're helping you guys heal. And I could even speak to that now, kind of how you spoke about how you are like, even at least being able to break the generational curses of not even acknowledging what was going on. Like, yeah, you're right. My dad never said that. Even saying that, I think, is huge. Like, even being able to say, like, I didn't.
Well, it's wonderful that you guys went into this business and you can grasp it, you understand it intellectually and emotionally. But a lot of people who have this generational trauma, they just live with it. The saying is, many men live a quiet life of desperation because they don't know where to go. They don't know how to seek help, and some people can't afford it. It's not cheap, and the fact that you both have studied it and you're giving this help to people is fantastic. But there's a huge percentage of the population who don't know they're living this generational trauma.
Yeah.
And as a kid growing up, I mean, it leads to low self-esteem, sometimes isolation. It leads to inability to project your authentic self because you're hiding so much.
Yeah.
And you're stuffing your emotions down, and you don't know how to argue. You don't know how to get an intellectual fight. You end up blowing up.
Yeah.
Right.
People have two forms of emotion, rage and silence, and you don't understand that there is something wrong, and it affects the people around you. And then you end up associating with people who have the same thing, and so none of you are healthy.
Yeah, so it makes sense. You're like, this is how it is.
And you just die with it. And I think for me, the low self-esteem was something that was there a long time in my life, and I just pushed right through it. I was told, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just go. And if you hurt someone on the side or something, you just got to bulldoze right through life without feeling what you were doing. Yeah. So it's there, and the thing that's important is a lot of people don't even understand they're traumatized. Yeah. And they have no idea.
Because one of my questions that I was going to ask was, when did you both notice like something's different about how I grew up, the messages, the way I act? Like, when did you kind of notice like, ooh, this isn't quite normal, right? Because again, like when we're in our system, our body can maybe feel it, but how do I know this isn't, or this is trauma, right? When did you kind of notice, at what age, or was there a certain situation where you kind of noticed, okay, this isn't, maybe this wasn't
I think
as
as a
normal.
kid, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was wrong. I always felt different from the other kids. I felt like an outsider. I never felt like I belonged. I knew something was wrong, but as a young age, you have no idea how to deal with it. And we weren't allowed to talk about it. All they did was keep secrets. Yeah. And then my dad would, take me places, don't tell mom. So you're told from your father, don't tell your mother. And so you have no one to talk to. And what's unique, what I'm seeing now, is that a lot of teenagers today are using bots as their best friend. So they're coming home with their problems, like, Jane wouldn't let me sit with the cool club, and the robots are actually
like the AI.
They're friends, which is very scary. But I look back, maybe at an age when I had no one to talk to, and there was no adult there for emotional guidance. A robot would probably be something good. But I knew at a young age I was different, and I didn't belong, and my family was different. Yeah.
I would say for me, I genuinely didn't catch it till I was much older. I would say probably later into my 20s, and that was it wasn't something that I learned lightly. It was something that crashed into me, truthfully. I remember feeling younger, and I guess maybe now I'm making some connections. I always felt like a problem. And I always felt different, within my family. But I would say that is because I was always, a deeply emotional child. Deeply emotional. And my family and my culture and how I was raised is not that. It never was. So I guess in that sense, I always felt different. It was just kind of doors being shut in your face. I don't want to deal with you. I cannot hear you right now. I don't know why you're feeling like that. Go do something with it, So in that sense, it felt like a problem. But really then, the messaging was, I am the problem. Not my family. My family's fine. I'm just, I'm too emotional. I take things too much to heart. I'm too anxious. I worry too much. I'm doing too much, And then as a kid, it's, nice and cute. Right? And then I relate to, a lot of my teen work. It's so funny sometimes, I've had clients say, well, you probably were never like this. And I'm like,
if you only knew.
Hey. But when I was a teen, it just, or when I started getting older, too, I was just angry. And then you start delving into really negative coping skills. And then as a result of that, you get into treatment. And you learn why you're doing those negative coping skills. And so that's kind of where I maneuvered, right? I was doing unhealthy things, making unhealthy choices, being in unhealthy relationships. And then I was like, oh, hold on. This was actually because the way my family was dealing things was not inherently normal. It was our normal, but that wasn't okay. That wasn't normal. That isn't right. That's not how the dynamic should be. And actually the way I was feeling about it was correct. But I was they were this, you're doing too much right now, so do not talk about it.
What made you go to therapy in your 20s?
I was messing up really badly
I know,
in life.
but most people still wouldn't go. They would just continue with their life.
That wasn't me. I would say
Yeah.
I was such I knew I needed, and I guess like that's kind of how you're like, I knew I was just I just knew there was something wrong.
Yeah.
Like I knew I had too much going on for me, and I've always, you guys probably know this about me, I've always been a talker. Like I'm a yapper.
Really? I didn't know that.
Certified yapper. Yeah.
Certified.
Yeah. Like I will yap.
Yeah.
So that was me even in those ways. Like I'm not uncomfortable with having difficult conversations. I'm not uncomfortable talking about what I'm feeling or about the fact that you're crossing my boundary. Like I've always been that. But in my family, I was like, okay, you're too much. You're dramatic. Like you're doing all these things, right? So in that sense, I think like I started feeling outside of things and I felt wrong. So I felt like I needed help because the way I'm dealing with these things is wrong then. And that made me like want to seek help. I had to.
Would you consider yourself a highly sensitive person?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Jeez.
so the other side of the coin is you're not sensitive, so you stuff everything down. So there'd be no reason to go to therapy at 20 because you just live the life and continue it.
Yes.
That's the problem with
A lot
having
of-
no
yes.
sensitivity and no emotions, and you just
Absolutely.
you just march on.
But okay, this is like also transgenerational trauma, but we also get into like our lineage and like kind of spirituality and things of that nature, and that's something that like my family delves into a whole lot. But I will say like I was honestly, I felt like I was carrying their emotions. Like I'm carrying your burdens, like my mom was 2 when her mom passed away. Her dad got remarried and she had to live with her great grandparents. And then, he migrated to California and she had to stay over there. And my dad, God, same thing kind of, but like his dad was just like not a very good person. Like they had all of the things that they never talked about that they absolutely did a great job at stuffing. And it came out in behaviors. And I felt like you guys gave me all of that. Like, here, take my baggage and scream and yell and fight because you can say it and we cannot, right? And I remember even as I like got older, and still I hadn't delved into like this work, right? But I was always a dramatic one. Whatever, that's me, I guess, sure. We were at my sister's wedding and no one wanted to talk for her wedding. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'll do it, sure. And I started like sobbing because it was like an emotional thing for me. And then my dad, and I remember these conversations because they're few and far between, or at least they were. They're much, much more frequent now. But he was like, and in Spanish, he was like, I really wish I had the ability to do that. Like, the way that I was raised, like, I can't do that. I would love to have that conversation and, like, talk about how much, like, I love, your sister and, like, how proud of them I am. And I just don't have that in me. Like, I don't have, but I would love to. And so then I started actually, like, learning more about my dad, like, as a person and less as my dad, right? So I was just kind of like, he has all that I have. He's also deeply emotional and wise and all of the above, but he doesn't talk about it. Like he, again, like you said, stuffs it, right? So in that sense, I felt like, am I carrying this for you? Is that like the transgenerational trauma that you passed down to me? Your trauma is the fact that you actually cannot talk about it. Your means of survival is, I cannot talk about this.
Well, I think it's also built into their body. I remember after going through seminars and stuff before I opened La Ventana, and I had this awakening, I took my father out to breakfast and I said, Dad, I love you. And he looked at his scrambled eggs and said, I feel the same way, but I can't say it.
Yeah.
He told me he loved me, but he couldn't say the words because it was in their DNA, I think. And his mother never told him. Yeah. His father never told him, so it just went down and down. Yeah. He became a good grandfather because he eventually sobered up, and my niece says great things about him. But when you're in that scope of structured trauma, you're not going to break it. Yeah. And he didn't go to therapy. They didn't have that stuff back then, and he didn't know how to express anything. But it's just so odd and sad that you couldn't tell your son you loved him. Yeah. But you could say, I feel that way.
Imagine, then this is where I start to get sad about it too, and then that builds that empathy because then I imagine their childhood.
Right.
Was probably
I'm like, geez,
it's probably worse than ours. And
it's
you don't know what they went through.
Yeah, like if you are this hardened of a person, geez, what made you this way? Why? I know that I deserved a lot of love, and you felt like you couldn't give it to me. There's a reason why. I wonder what you were not given and provided, that you couldn't offer it to me, right? So then again, learning about this is there's this like huge ability to be like, I'm not a problem. Like, that's not about me. It's about the fact that like there is generations and generations and generations of all of this learning, right? And I genuinely do think it gets better. Like, we can talk
sometimes.
About,
I don't think it always gets better. Sometimes, I mean, to gain emotional intelligence is something you have to first acknowledge, which a lot of people won't do, and then you have to work on it, and you have to go to it. So to not even understand that it exists, you're just going to live your life and just go through it, and then you're going to die.
Yeah. So then this mental health work and like this treatment program is really about like also getting that word out and reaching as many people as you can and serving these families and like helping them, hopefully even planting seeds. Like just, okay, you might not get it now, but this little nugget that I'm giving you, as you continue to grow, it might be something that you go back to and be like, hey, that therapist maybe had a point there. And like, let me go back and talk about this, right?
Yeah, but society also promotes mental health. I think when I was...
We're just at a different time.
When I was in my teens, early 20s, nobody went to therapists. Woody Allen used to have movies and make jokes about therapists, and they were funny. Yeah. Oh, you have to go to your therapist to talk about whatever, and it was something of a negative, you know. And nowadays, everybody goes. They have them online. You can call the phone. You can do.
It's seen as such a strength and like something to admire. Like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. Good job. Like. That was definitely my response when my parents started doing it on their own. And I was like, hell yeah, go you. Yeah. But definitely not something that they openly share with their, you know, aunts, uncles, sisters. They're like, we don't talk about that. Like, it's just also a new generation. But that's also, I would say, like a different form of breaking generational curses, being able to like resist and talk about these things, even though it's not what you talk about. And it's not like what you do. It's
very uncomfortable to say things that can be perceived as negative. Yeah. But when you bring them up and talk about them, they actually become positive. Yeah. And you understand more, and you understand why your parents were this way, why you're this way with your kids, and the problems you made, the mistakes you made. And if you understand it, I'm not saying it makes it easier to admit that you made mistakes, but as a parent, you are going to make mistakes, and that's just life. And at least you can discuss it, like I've discussed with my kids, that I was not emotionally present for some of their years that they needed someone to talk to. Yeah. And we were divorced, so they had with their mom and they were with me. Yeah. And it breaks my heart. But I had no idea, you know?
It's like being grateful for those conversations and leaning into like when, you know, our systems don't talk about things, and then it's like taking that one link wherever it is, that one person to lean in. Like you said, like with your dad, you're like, no, we're sitting here and we're talking about this, right? Oh, yeah. And like something I always go back to, right?
I know my dad hates to see me come in. He's like, oh my God, what do you want to talk about? You know, like even how you're saying, I'm just now thinking, right? But like even how you're saying like your dad couldn't tell you like I love you. Yeah. My dad never like, and he's a great guy, I have to say that, and that's my own like, you know, I have to protect him, but he had his faults. He did a lot of not so great things growing up. But I think now, and this is where, I mean, maybe we are like fortunately like a success story where it's like this full circle moment where we could work through it and attest to how therapy does work and treatment does work, and you know, working through these things and talking about it absolutely works, because I am like living proof of it. I like, my dad now tells me he loves me, but it was again because I was like, Dad, I love you. And he was like, okay. I'm like, hey, hello, like I love you. And then now, and that was like years ago, but now he's like, I love you. Like it's not foreign anymore. And then we get into the part of transgenerational trauma where I think we are serving the population a lot, at least, of like the cycle breakers, you know, the trailblazers, the people that go back and then give all this information to their kids. And they're like, hey, by the way, this is like not working, right? And like, this is why, and this is what's going on, right? So it's like, I think, again, a lot of like the work that I like to do is I really love to empower people with that. Like, yeah, transgenerational trauma can be such an awful thing, and it is for a lot of people. And there are a lot of people that don't even know they're in it and then don't get out of it, right? But while you know, that is also a strength. You go back and you're like, hey, yeah, I went through this, but we are stopping here. Like, yes. And that, like, that even reminds me of a quote, like, it like, gosh, how does it go? It ran our lives until it ran into me. And it's just kind of like, this is not what we're doing. Someone has to be like, this isn't working. And it's okay with being the problem for that moment. A lot of the identified patients or identified clients that I get are the problem, are the scapegoat, because they're talking about the family things. They're talking about the traumas, the abuse, the neglect, the alcoholism, the substance use. They're talking about it. No one wants to talk about it. Therefore, the person who's talking about it is a problem.
Even though that might be the healthiest person in this system, right?
But that's what needs to happen for it to stop.
Sure.
But the talk has to be productive. Like in our family, I have a lot of cousins. My mom had, I think, 11 kids in her family. My dad had 5. And they all had cousins. And we'll get together and we'll talk about growing up and tell stories that my wife is like, oh my God. And what we do is we laugh. Remember Uncle Ray did this. Remember so-and-so did this. Remember somebody did this. And they're really horrific stories, but we laugh them off and we just have a great time because that's how we deal with growing up with situations that we were unable to manage. And it was chaos with a lot of us, and we just laugh it off. So it's good to have the talks, but you also need to be able to come out with some new coping skills and some understanding that, you know what, it really wasn't that funny. But to us, we have to, if you don't laugh, you cry. And that's how you learn how to survive.
I'll never forget, there was this one family weekend when we only had the chemical dependency. It was like before we had the mental health residentials. We're doing this family weekend, and it might have been like my first or second year here, and we're doing this family weekend, and one of the things that we have them do is the 40 sentences exercise. And so all of the families with their loved one that's in treatment sit down, and they've prepped these letters where they go, you know, what are 10 things I am angry, resentful, sad, with you about? What are 10 things I love, appreciate, and value about you? What are 10 things I want to ask forgiveness for? And what are 10 things I want to ask forgiveness or forgive you for? And there was a particular family that kept it real safe and light, right? And this is your opportunity of all times to get real. We've been prepping for weeks. We've been talking about, we have the quote on top of it of if it's love them enough to tell them the truth, right? And all of a sudden, Steve comes up. And I don't know if you remember this, but you stood up in the middle of them sharing, and you talked about, like, if it's not now, like, I didn't get this. I wish I would have gotten this. I didn't get it. Take advantage. Get real. Like, this is it, you guys. Like, and it shook, like, the entire room. And then everyone got deeper. And I think people started sharing things that weren't even written. It was like, okay, I didn't write it down, but I'm going for it, because you're right. When else do we have this opportunity to sit down and really share what, I'm going through, or what I'm thinking, or what I'm really hurt by from you, And so it, like, started this process in family weekends of, like, I always will share, what genograms are, and I'll share my own story of, like, how my grandfather was, like, my dad's dad, right? And, if you ask my dad who he was an asshole. He was an alcoholic. He had rage issues. He, was physically abusive with my grandmother, and he wasn't affectionate whatsoever. If you ask me about my grandfather, he was the most affectionate, kind, loving, spiritual, God-loving, God-fearing man. Never saw him drink, loved his family, was so generous, right? And so then it started getting me thinking of, like, how did we have such we're talking about two different people. What happened? And what was hard was that the family knew, the secret was, we knew something happened when my grandfather was on tour in the Navy, because he left and was that one way, as, all of his children were already born by then, and then came back and was never touched alcohol again, went to church every Sunday, showed up for the family as best as he could. There was still the emotional struggle, but he showed up so differently, from night and day. And he had passed before I got to ever ask, and nobody in the family knew. Nobody asked him what happened. And so now it's the conversations that I get to have with my dad of, like, with the rage that, has gotten passed down that my brother, kind of still struggles with, or I at points, have struggled with, that I'm, like, so aware that I cannot pass down.
Yeah.
That I will not pass down to Michael, that I have to talk through. Michael's my son.
Yeah.
Like talking through it with him of like, this is the feeling, this is what's coming up. I'm not trying to stuff down my anger. I'm not trying to blame it or shift it, but it's like, this is what's coming up for me. And like showing him this is what we do with these big feelings, because no one in my family ever freaking talked about it, you know, ever. And so it's part of like this work is like, we all three aren't just talking the talk, we've like walked the walk, and like it's been easier or harder, but regardless, like we're still acknowledging like what's come up for us and how do we change it for these generations, you know, beyond us. And it's big work. And so I think that moment I always go back to is like, you could have just sat, watched them do the level that they were comfortable with doing at that point, and you decided like, absolutely not. Because
that's great, because La Ventana is a safe place.
Oh, yeah.
And people have to know that. And when we go back home, it's not always safe.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever felt safe growing up. I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. Yeah. I tried to be invisible. If you didn't notice me, I couldn't get hurt. I couldn't, get in trouble. So finding a safe place and providing a safe place for your son, for your kids, for your family, even for your friends, is something that's unique, and very few people can do that. Yeah. And it takes years to understand that you weren't in a safe place, you're not providing a safe place, and to change that, to make it a safe place, I'd rather dig ditches for 10 years than go through all that therapy doing that. It's like so hard, and just, you just blame yourself for so many things, but you didn't know. You didn't know the difference. You didn't know any better. Yeah. So what you're talking about is very similar to everybody, and the fact that you are now talking to your son about it is great. Like my niece, his son is going off to college, and we were talking, she was sending him off, and they went to go look at the college, and she was talking about, don't drink alcohol. He goes, Mom, you have told me about alcohol every day of my life. I'm not going to do it. I understand it. Because she knows, and she put this in his head that it can be bad. It's not just a big party, and you can fall into, and you have this DNA where you can fall into alcoholism.
Already predisposed.
I remember a therapist in the beginning telling me, you're lucky you can go to dinner and have a glass of wine. I go to dinner, I have to have the bottle, and then I go home and drink 10 more bottles.
My mom used to tell us that growing up too.
Yeah.
She was just like, be careful, you guys. Like when we got old enough, and she noticed, like obviously, like we, go out for a drink or something. You're in your 20s, you want to have fun. She's just like, you guys have alcoholism on both ends. Right. Better be careful.
Right.
You're in trouble.
I'm like, But fortunately, it wasn't something that touched me, and I didn't even understand. I was like, well, that was my dad and all his uncles, like not me, like I didn't get it. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, actually, like that, could have been very well me, and I'm no different than anyone else, but just,
Well, it's great that your mom actually put that in your head.
100%,
so it was a safe place for you to get this knowledge and not think it was something stupid. That,
she was like,
that
wait a minute.
Maybe she is saying something that's important.
Yeah,
very good.
Absolutely.
And there was something that you said about, I couldn't go home and talk about things. I had to be quiet and be invisible.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so there's this quote that I had pulled up about like when healing from generational trauma, you can't expect support from those who've passed it on. So if it's like, I'm coming home wanting to talk about whatever it is, they're not going to maybe have the capacity to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so there's really this importance of finding where is that safety within my body, and how do I heal, like what my body's, like you said, like the tiger's in the bush right now, right? Of like what was passed down throughout my genes maybe isn't applicable to this same situation, but it feels like it. And so how do I find safety, not just in my environment, but like within my body? And like, how do I regulate myself? And it's not, we don't have this manual for life. We don't have that. And so if it's not therapy, then like, where do we go? And maybe it's through free podcasts like this, right? It's through these like amazing books. And you had mentioned one, and I actually wanted to mention a few more. So it didn't start with you. And then there's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
That's a good one.
And then there's Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents. Yeah. And then there's a whole workbook. Yeah. So it's like you can do that without a therapist. Would I recommend having a therapist? For sure. Absolutely, but what if I don't have the resources? I can get these books, online in the library. I can check them check them out. And then it's how to do the work and recognize the patterns and healing from your past to create yourself. Yeah. So there's all of these resources out there and there's knowledge. And so it's how do I take this information and apply it to my story and to me? And then it's doing the work and walking the walk. And it's really uncomfortable. And I think, I always say if we take our brain and we go very basic with it, just one of two things. It seeks pleasure and it avoids pain. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm telling you, sit with the discomfort and talk about and feel all of this stuff that we've experienced, whether it's, before my memories can even be recalled, my body will know about it. Your whole system's going to say, fucking run. Yeah. What are you talking about, right? And so that brings into like this addiction piece of addiction goes to, I'm going to seek pleasure because that my system doesn't make sense to me on this very basic level, right? Maybe logically I'll understand it, but my system's not going to understand it.
Choosing to have to sit with that over doing that. No.
Sure. Yeah. And it might be in every hour, every minute, I'm actively choosing to not run and to sit in it, and then I start gaining more of this distress tolerance, and then that we start to see those like tiny shifts, and then we start encouraging, talking about it within their system, right? Yeah. And so that's why I loved when you shared, Steve, about having that conversation with your kids. That you're like, I never would have had that with my dad. Like that's so.
Well, they actually brought it up.
Right, so, but they felt comfortable enough. Yeah. You were like, I would have never brought that. So it didn't.
I didn't even know that I was not emotionally there for them during their growing up years. I just felt so bad. But
I did the best that I could.
That's okay, but you still feel some shame as a parent.
Absolutely.
But these books are great, but the hard part is, can you discuss it with your parents? Right. And are your parents willing to receive this? Like, there were times when my dad did get sober as he got older, and we would have family functions, but I still was afraid to bring up the past. And I could never bring up what life was like. I don't even think he remembered. Because he was so drunk.
I think there are also ways to like heal a lot of these things without having to talk to the person. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of like many things. I'm thinking of, so like, for example, on my dad's side, there's like a lot of trauma, and there was a huge like disconnect between the family, right? And so I never really spoke to that side of the family, and they're passed away recently. His mom passed away, and I realized like, oh my gosh, I actually carry a lot that I would have loved to talk to her about, like a lot that I think that contributed to the way that I am and like how I react and how I feel, valued or loved or whatever that might be. But I also think, and it's going to sound so basic, but getting into like healing these things is really just like talking about it. And though I do think it's very rewarding and it could be huge to talk about it with the person or the source of that, I also think just talking, right? Like just saying it out loud, like making it like, real. No, like to a therapist, journaling, like to a friend, to a family member, like me and my sisters. I am fortunate enough that they're all like kind of in this line of work, and we all kind of talk about it, and that is so incredibly healing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great, but to have the conversation with the person,
it's huge.
It takes a lot of courage, and I actually regret that I never sat down with my dad and talked about it, because he was sober for the last 10, 15 years of his life, but we never talked about it. I never talked to my mom about how she, dealt with it. She had an eating disorder, and she just ate her feelings. In our house, we ate our feelings or we drank our feelings. That's all we did. Yeah. And I would have liked to have talked to them about it. And now they're dead, and there's not much you can do. Yeah. But I agree, just even if you're just talking to your therapist, it's good just to get it out. Yeah.
And there's this thing, like, because where I thought you were going to go, because I love where you went, where I thought you were going to go was this piece of, and this is a lot of like the grief and loss work, right? Of we can still heal even if that we don't get an apology from that person, right? And even if that person's passed away, do we just not get to heal? We don't get the closure, right? And so there's like the unsent letter, right? Yeah. Of like, I can write the letter to the person. Yeah. This is how it felt. This is what I'm upset about you at. Yeah. This is also what I like appreciate about what I learned. I learned how not to be, or whatever it might be. And so there's power in that. If I don't get that opportunity, great. If I take advantage of it now and I have that mutual kind of, time, but how do I, if the person, isn't around, or isn't accessible or whatever for whatever reason, I can do this unsent letter to them and start kind of processing it. We call it the empty chair technique, right? And I can start and I can start processing through that. I don't need the other person. It's great if I do, but therapy only isn't dependent on that.
And what I will say, that's a lot of what I think I do with the clients now. Like, 9 times out of 10, they don't want to talk to their parents. They're coming to us, obviously residential.
Parents don't want to talk to them either.
They're like, please, no. Yeah, you know, like the parents or siblings or what, they don't want to talk about it, right? Like, they don't want to talk about it. It's like, fine, you go get the help, but leave me out of it. I don't want to open this up, right? So a lot of the tools is like, okay, I'm here. What happened, right? Or even just acknowledging, and I'll again speak for myself. I can speak for my clients and like these huge aha moments that I've seen them have when we are just talking. They're like, oh wow, like you can see in their head or their eye or their like body. They're like, oh, like that was something that just clicked for me. Even as you're talking about grief, I remember one time, some time ago, my therapist. Again, lots of estrangements. I have like a sister that I'm estranged with, and that affects me. And that therapist, I would never have thought about, like, and I'm a therapist, right? But she was like, so how have you grieved your sister? And I was like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean? She's still alive. And she's like, well, like, how have you grieved her though? Like, let's acknowledge it for what it is. Let's talk about it. I know this is uncomfortable for you, but let's talk about what it is. You have not talked to her. You have not grieved her. Like, yes. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And it completely switched the way I thought about that, the way I felt about it, like how heavy it actually was in my body and like my soul and my emotions. And just her acknowledging that, me having the space for someone to acknowledge it and me to talk about it openly, unbiasedly, was like huge, you know? And so I'd like to think that's what we do also for our clients and our families. Like, hey, I'm not the person that did this to you, but I have your back, and we're going to talk about this.
And be bold enough to say that.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about it for you, even sometimes. Like, literally just last week, I was helping a family that was only Spanish speaking, and there was a father, just, you know, Hispanic as they come, just like not talking at all, just nodding his head. Yep, I understand. Yep, I get it. Yep, whatever. And I literally was like, you want to say something? I was like, I can't help but think that there's like something behind that like nod. Like, you don't have any thoughts about like what's going on for your daughter right now and like what we're planning on with discharge. Like, you don't have any thoughts about this? And he kind of just like smiled and was like, well, I do. And I'm like, I would love to hear it. And he was just like, I don't know that my daughter wants to hear it. And she was like, I want to hear it. Like, please tell me. And he was like, okay, you know, and then, you know, started saying, you know, his opinion about what it is that we were talking about. But even then, like, you could see in his body language, it was very different from it was like, okay, well, this is, you know, this is what's going on and so on and so forth, what they were talking about. But like giving them the space to do that is huge, and I think goes a long way. And then we talk about how they can take that and run with it, like how you're talking about your son. Be with my niece and my nephew, like every opportunity with them is an opportunity for me to help them and to break generational curses. Like, that's generally how I see it.
Well, you provide a safe space, just like the father. He would have never said anything in a million years. He just happened to be lucky enough to be with you and his daughter when this stuff came up. Otherwise, they never would have talked about it. Never in a million years. And to get people to actually open up on things that are bothering them, have been bothering them for years, is very difficult. I'm sure you know that as a therapist, but most people will just let it go.
Sometimes it takes knocking on it every day, like every week. Let's talk about it little by little by little by little, and then finally you get to the point where it's like, wow, that's growth. You wouldn't even touch this. You would blow up this whole room if we even talked about this. And now you're like, yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, bring them in. Yeah, let's have this session. Let's talk about it, right? Like, those little baby steps are huge and so rewarding. And
the first baby step leads to more and more and more. And I think when you don't discuss these things that are bothering you, they just stay with you. And it's like you're carrying all this weight, like a 50-pound bag. There are so many things I wish I would have discussed with my mother and father. And I just can't. And so now I'm trying to discuss things with my kids and let them know where I came from and the mistakes that I made and why I was emotionally not there for a lot of their life. I mean, I helped them financially. I sent them to college. We did vacations, but I didn't really provide the present emotional support that they needed, and it breaks my heart. Yeah, it really does. Yeah. But support is something that not everybody has. Yeah. And so to go out and find it and reach it and talk about it like you did, you're unusual. Yeah. You're unusual. You're very unusual.
In many ways. I'm going to keep saying that. Beautifully unusual.
Yes.
I like that one better.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. No, it was a compliment. Of course, you know that.
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about these, like you touched on it with the book of like This Didn't Start With You, right? Yeah. And so I want to go over like the study. Yes. In 2013, but then I also want to hear what you had written down. You were kind of talking about before this.
So I
what
mean,
you'd share.
like I'm a geek for these things. Like I have so many books, and actually, like one of the books that you were talking about, an additional book, which actually my sister recommended to me, is called My Grandmother's Hands, and it's talking about like transgenerational traumas and like healing it. And so that's another really good book, and it talks more about like culture too, and it's like a little bit different, less like scientific and more just kind of like real family things. But so one of the books that I've been reading recently is It Didn't Start With You. I had read it some time ago and I was like, hold on, it didn't stick. So to me, what was interesting and things that we like know, right? But I feel once there's like science and research behind it, I'm like, oh my God, right? You had spoken about the cherry blossom.
Right. Yes. So 2013, they did this study with rats in a cage with this cherry blossom scent. And what they did is they set up the cage to have sort of a small electric shock on the bottom. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so they took a mouse, and introduced him into the cage, and then they introduced the cherry blossom scent, and then they shocked him. And so the mouse started to associate the cherry blossom smell with pain. And so then they started to take away the electric shock and only introduce the cherry blossom smell, and it would have the same physical reactions. Yeah. So once it was doing that without the electrical shock, then they took that same mouse, and they bred it with a female that had never had any experience in this cage. Mm-hmm. And then they took that offspring and introduced it to the cage without the electrical shock, and introduced the cherry blossom smell, and it had the same trauma response. Then they took that offspring and had it mate with a neutral female, and then took that third offspring, introduced it. It had the same response without the electrical shock. It went on for 7 generations of rats. And so it talked about like, this is epigenetics. This is not a socially learned thing. The father rat, if you want to call it, or mouse, right? Didn't introduce his kid and say, stay away from this, or stay away. It wasn't learned. Yes. It was within their genetics passed on. Yeah. And so what they had found in this study, there was like biological changes too. So it was the offspring of the trained mice were more sensitive to the smell of cherry blossoms. The offspring's olfactory, so within their nose receptors, were they were more sensitive in detecting the smell. They were jumpier and more nervous, and they could detect smaller amounts of cherry blossoms, and rather than like a controlled mouse. And so it's like on all these different levels, like we kind of talked about here of like our body knew, right? Whether it was learned of like, okay, when I'm quiet, I don't get yelled at, or when I'm not seen, I don't have to get in the car and it's scary, or whatever it might be. It was more than that. It was like our body knew to, be quiet, or my heart's racing, but I don't say anything, or whatever it is. It's like this piece of genetics that was passed down within this study. And so then that started, what you were talking about within this book.
In this book, so the researcher her name was Julia Yahara, and it was in 2005. And so she does have also research with mice, and I'll get into that a little bit, but what I liked or what I found interesting was she also did research for years coming on like the 9/11 women that were pregnant. She went on and did like a longitudinal. There we go. That. She did a study of the children that were affected, and they already were born with compromised cortisol levels. So even without them being exposed to like kind of like the cherry blossom, right? They were already born, and cortisol is our stress hormone, which is like obviously gets pumped and it goes through your body when you're going through some like your trauma response or going through something traumatic. They were already born with compromised levels of that, right? So even before anything, that is something that she was already taking note of. She did the same thing with Holocaust survivors that then went on to have children later, completely weren't even pregnant at that time, right? Where we're talking about like the germ egg, where it's like you're carrying it. I'm carrying eggs with me. I'm not pregnant, but at some point, the eggs or the sperm is already affected by your environment and what you're going through, right? Which is.
And to speak on that, something so the way she did these studies was not just like, oh, you're a Holocaust survivor. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to study you and your children. I think it was only down to like 30 couples, maybe. It was a very small number that she compared to. And they had to rule out that your child does not have these genetic set points because they're witnessing domestic violence. Because then you would be let out of the study. Yeah. Or they're bullied at the school. You would be let out of the study. It was only because of the Holocaust in their generations, right? I think it was their great-grandfathers, whatever it might have been. It was fascinating. Wow.
Yes. Which then speaks to it, right? I'm like, okay, then this is, I mean, we knew it was real. We see it. But it's like, it has so much more power, I think, when it's like research-based. And then she went on to do a mice study. And it was different from the cherry blossom because it wasn't like they were exposing them, right, to something traumatic like the electric shock and then kind of going on and connecting the smell to that. It was separating mice from their babies when they were born at different levels. There were like controlled studies and different experimental groups that they did. So it was like at different levels of either like nothing at all or some, or like having them be together and then separated and things of that nature. And then seeing what those toddler mice develop, right? And all of them had different levels of like anxiety, depression, and also compromised levels of cortisol and their offspring. Because I want to say it was something like every 12 weeks is a different generation for mice. Oh. Yeah. So it's like it's easier to study. And they continued studying that even when the offspring was not removed from like their parents when they were born. And they still had those different levels of anxiety. Even if it was lower levels, they were still predisposed and or born with a reaction to something that they were never even exposed to. So it's like you weren't reminded of it. There wasn't any smell cherry blossom going off and being like, hey, this is something you have to survive. You were already just born like, whoa, hold on, you know? And that speaks to what a lot of our clients probably go through. A lot of the teens nowadays probably are going through.
I don't even know why.
Yeah. Like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I so different? Why do I feel so anxious? Why am I so depressed? Why do you, whatever, right? And it's like, sometimes we're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I believe you. I hear that. I can imagine.
That goes back to the geogram in the program. Like, people sit down and do their family history, and that they realize, well, their dad was an alcoholic, mom had mental illness, grandma had it, her grandma had it, her father had it, and it just slowly, it's part of the body that slips through and goes all the way down to 4, 5, 6 generations. The hard part is breaking it.
Right.
And there's studies in neuroplasticity where you can train your brain to help regulate your emotions, but it does change those pathways, and you can cut the chain, but you have to be cognitive and conscious of what is happening and why you're training your brain to act this way. And a big part of it is when an emotion comes through, you have to be able to deal with it. Yeah. A lot of us grew up, we couldn't deal with it because we couldn't talk or anything. But if you can train your brain through this, it's a way to stop the chain. Yeah. And if you stop the chain, that's a huge miracle.
Yeah. I'd also like to think again, silver linings, right? Like just trying to find the silver linings in these things. And there's not always them. But I also think going through difficult things like shapes you, unfortunately.
I totally agree. I think if you have the DNA to be an alcoholic or an addict, and you are in a family system where both parents have stopped that, you probably will not become it. But if you're raised that way, it's just part of the way you are. But it's also funny that you have a family where they have this generational trauma. There's 2 kids in the family. One becomes a drug addict, homeless on the street. One becomes a lawyer and goes to Harvard. Why is that?
There was this, I don't think it's a real actual brother, right, thing. I think it was more of an example. But it was that exact thing. It was like the son was very successful and a CEO, and his, brother was homeless and just couldn't, was struggling all his life. And when they asked them, how did you become the man you are? They both said, well, my dad.
Yeah.
Right? Because I followed my dad, and he drank, so I drank, and he didn't talk with emotions, so I don't talk with my emotions, and all of those things. And then the other one took it as like, I'm going to be nothing like you, right? And so because of my dad is the same answer, right? I just took it and I shifted different.
Perspective.
Totally, yeah. And so it's why would someone do one versus the other? Because I think everyone logically would be like, no one chooses addiction, right? No one's going to choose.
You don't raise your hand in 3rd grade and say, I want to be an addict.
For sure.
I want to be an astronaut or something.
For sure. And so it's not just choice, but at a certain point within our healing journey, it's I have to actively choose recovery every single hour. And I have to choose to pick up my phone. And I have to choose to reach out. And I have to choose to not do the maladaptive whatever I've been doing and engaging in, right? And it's really, really hard because our system is so habit forming. And so we go back to these habits all the time.
That is so admirable to me, though. I think having to... Again, I would never wish that on anyone, right? Having to go through struggles of addiction or overcome like heartbreak or, all of these like traumatic situations that can happen to someone. Seeing someone overcome that, though, is like...
If you look around the building here, there's people with 20 years, 30 years
and
sobriety,
I'm like,
10 years sobriety.
Wow.
And they say they have to still every day check in and make sure they don't go grab a drink.
And I'm like, you're amazing.
Yeah.
My hat's off to you because like genetics and the environment and even going back to like what makes this person, what makes that, it's just a stroke of not luck, but a stroke of whatever's in the air. So you had one different interaction, one message that went differently, some situation, whatever it was that led you down that road, you came back from it like huge.
I think a big part of that, and a lot of people don't put this into the recovery model, is empathy, and it's empathy for the people that raised you. And okay, my mom took me here and left me in the laundromat for hours, or she was with her boyfriend or whatever, and have empathy for the people that raised you, that they tried their best. That helps understand how you turned out the way you were, and then have empathy for yourself, because you didn't know any better. I mean, for years, we would do the inner child work, and you go back and I'd meet my little Stevie. I hated that boy. I thought he was a coward. He didn't speak up. He never said anything. He was just invisible. I hated that person. And the more you research it and think about it and go through therapy, that you have empathy for yourself as a kid who had no idea how to deal with the emotional world they were thrown into. I mean, many adults couldn't deal with it.
I give this example to our clients of, when we're doing inner child work, I said, okay, so just imagine it's pouring rain outside, and the door opens and a 5-year-old, whoever, pick the age, comes in, they're soaking wet and they're shivering. What would you do? And I have them answer, and it's usually I'd speak to them gently. I'd give them new clothes. I'd get them warm. I'd, get them some food. I'm so compassionate and empathetic with them, right? I said, okay, so what you do with your own self is you go, thanks, but I don't have time. And I close the door. I don't have time to deal with whatever that's coming up for me, right? Or I smoke and I numb out because I can't feel that, right? And so it's always that piece. So I hate that. I cannot tolerate whatever that is. And so part of it is like inviting that in and having more of that. We don't have more of that in the world as is, right? So it's trying to be as kind and empathetic and understanding as we can, but it's counteractive to maybe the anger that protected me for so long. Yeah. It's
and
very
got you where you are.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it
got
breaks that down because it's hurting me. Yeah. It's not helping me.
It's no longer a tool. You no longer need it. And it's time to put that down and find new tools. And that's also really
It's
hard.
also very hard to self-forgive and have self-compassion and it's easier to look at someone who's struggling over there and hug them and help them and do whatever you can, like the little kid at the door. You pick them up, you hug them, you give them food and warmth, but if it was you standing out there, you're right, you would probably shut the door on yourself. And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, is that the self-compassion and how do you forgive yourself for behaviors you feel were, in my opinion, were weak, coward, were, fake, were just awful.
Transgenerational shame.
Yeah. The shame is big. To get over that is a big part. You always feel like you don't belong.
So interesting that same analogy that you provided, I do like a spilt milk one. And I'm like, if there's a kid in here that spilled some milk, what would you tell him? Yeah. And then they're like, oh, I would help him clean it up, whatever. And they're like, okay. So then, like, what about the next day? And they're like, I want to pour myself some milk. Would you be like, no, you're good for nothing. Like, why are you going to do that?
Yeah,
you remember yesterday?
Mistakes.
Yes. And they're like, God, why are you being so mean? I usually do it in, like, a group. Sure. And then I'm like, okay. What about in, like, a few weeks they're having a beautiful day? They're like, they had a great day at school. They come home. They pour their milk and everything's fine. Would you then come over to that kid who's having a beautiful day and then be like, remember 2 weeks ago when you spilled that milk? That was really shitty. They're like, why would you do that? I'm like, exactly. Case in point, like, that's what we're doing to ourselves constantly, all the time. I'm not deserving of these good things. Like, or it's like your mom's voice or your dad's voice that you hear all the time, and then you adopt that voice because that's like your shame voice, and you continue going with that. And it's like, you would never do that to someone else, but you do it to yourself all the time. And then that continues to contribute to the symptoms that you're having and, like, how you react to them and the behaviors that you choose. So it's...
Well, it's funny because both of you are therapists, so you've studied all this. But if you talk to the layman and you ask them on a situation that was uncomfortable, how they dealt with it, they always come back and say, I wish I had said that. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I had done something else. And then the negative thoughts, the self-sabotage goes in because you didn't act the way you thought you should have. So you go to the next day and you have another confrontation with someone. And the people who are not therapists often make these mistakes, and they're self-judging and it's self-criticizing, and that's a hard thing to push through and to get through. And a lot of us have that.
Well, you can't do it alone.
No, you cannot do it alone. No,
like
that's true.
That's a huge thing, I think. And I do think, and myself included, I think you'll kind of walk aimlessly in it a little bit because you don't know until hopefully, and this is again like success stories, or at least people that do, because I know that there are a lot of people that don't, and then that's why La Ventana is here, like, hey, welcome, come on over, we'll help you. But you'll walk aimlessly for a while until, by the grace of God or whatever universe you believe in, you stumble across that one step, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and then you find it, and then you have the knowledge, a therapist or not, and you give it to someone else, and that's what we do. Like, we're born innately to survive, whether that be a really negative way to do so by transgenerational trauma or finding the means, right? But you cannot expect to do it by yourself.
And it does take years. For me, the biggest problem is listening. Listening to people. Like, you guys sit for hours and listen to people. How do you do that? I mean, it's like pain. So when we're having conversations, sometimes I already have the response before you finished what you said. Yeah. So when you're listening, it's work. For you, it's probably just, I love this. I love hearing it. But a lot of people, to get to that place where you are present and you can feel the empathy or the pain that the person is talking about, it's a hard thing.
It's a choice, I think, It has to, you have to come into it because, yes, fully therapists, full-blown therapists.
Well, and I can relate to that same thing too. I can have a client sharing their story, and the whole time I'm thinking, I have it right here.
You have the answer.
I have the answer. I know what can help you. But if I give you the answer, you're not going to. Right. I can save you in 5 minutes. We got 45 more minutes in the session, right? Yeah. But that's not going to heal them. No. If I give them the answer constantly, right? And so it's this piece of, I'm going to hold that. If they need me to, I'll bring that front, or I'll ask a certain leading question, right? But I have that same feeling of I can get to, that's not the point of therapy, right? The point of therapy is like sit and process and pull out and understand and start connecting these patterns and getting curious and having them lead to it, because then if they can gain that muscle and practice that, then they're going to continue to do it in all these different relationships and whatever it might be, right? And so so it is a practice thing for sure.
But also, like, again, going into how we teach and how we break and how we do, right? So I would say at my house, right, my team, my clients, I feel like there's so much power in your influence and your choices and the way that you choose to present yourself, right? So I know me. And I know what I want to say immediately. And Steve, I can't tell you how many times I bite my tongue. Like a day. Like I'm like, okay. Like, and I have to practice fully listening, fully wanting to hear them. I have to be my kindest self. And then it's interesting because then I see my house manager be like that. Or I see staff be like that with the teens. Or I see, or they'll come ask like, oh my God, the other day when you had that conversation, like, how did you do that? Or how can you help me do this? And it's like, you influence more. So it's like, we're healing ourselves. And I'm doing that because I would love to be talked to that way. And I want to be listened to, right? But then you're also helping other people do it. And then it keeps going. It catches fire, right? And then I can also say, as a therapist off at home, I don't have the same patience for my family, right? Like, there's like this TikTok where it's like everyone expects you to come home and like be the therapist still. And then you're like, well, take a look around. You're not gonna, or something like, you're not gonna see that girl, right? But it's like a choice. I do want to be that for my family. It's a choice. And then I also experience like my mom mirroring that with me, right? Where sometimes I know my mom and I know who raised me and I know what she would have said. And I know how she would have reacted, but I'm also teaching her how to be patient with me by me being patient with her and like validating her and reassuring her, and then she'll mirror it right back. And I don't even have to ask, right? But it's like you also are teaching people how to treat you, how to treat others by the way that you treat people.
It's a learned process. There's no question about it. But I think growing up in the generational trauma, you learn to make quick decisions because you have to survive. You learn to judge people right away. You learn to look at someone and says, I don't think you're good. That taught you how to survive in a place that was not safe and it was full of chaos. So this goes with you until one day you wake up and people get it at 20, some get it at 70. You know, and it's just something you carry in your life and your relationships because of the generational trauma that
and that's what we try to teach is like it was a survival mechanism as a kid.
It worked.
And it worked.
Yeah.
That's why we do it.
Do you think it made you, sorry to interrupt.
No, I was going to say, but do I have to do it now?
But it really didn't
in my
work.
relationship.
It didn't really work. It worked. It got you somewhere, but
it worked, right?
Yeah.
And so Sharon and TJ in the podcast right before us talked about this brilliant strategy of drinking alcohol. It was because it helped me numb. So it's brilliant. Is it brilliant? Is it effective? Is it long term? No, right? But shutting up when I was a kid was brilliant because it didn't get me XYZ consequence, right? And so I learned this maladaptive skill. And so it's now in safe relationships, in safe spaces, am I still shutting up? Because now it's not as effective. And so that's the part of like unlearning it in these safe places that we create.
No question about it.
Yeah.
But also, I guess, like, do you think what you went through and how you lived made you a good leader?
I don't know if I'm a good leader. I think I bulldozed through things. And I think I missed a lot along the way. Like stop and smell the roses. So no matter what adverse consequence came at me, I just pulled myself up in my bootstraps. It didn't matter if I hurt somebody here or if I did something here. It was just like a straight arrow to accomplish what? I wasn't even sure what I was accomplishing.
And I think maybe, like, if I can lightly, like, obviously give a different perspective, that's, like, not what we see.
Absolutely. In fact, we made eye contact.
I was like,
do you hear this man talking? Are you kidding me? I'm not a good leader. We looked at each other like, are you kidding me, Steve?
And so I think obviously there goes ourselves and, like, what we've been passed down. And our own biggest critics, I can say the same thing. Like, when someone gives me a compliment, I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you. Stop now. Like, that's enough, right? But that's not our experience. And I think, like, you give us this platform to be able to do this. And you did what you had to do, given what you went through. You had the tools to do it because of what you went through, right? My sister, she, again, goes in, she is very much into this book. She's actually writing a book about trauma-informed leadership. And how, of course, it is something that is, like, nothing that anyone wants to go through, but it actually also is a huge thing. Who would have ever thought that if you didn't have the life that you did have, that you would then come and make this?
Probably not.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right. So it's like
we
in therapy, we also obviously want to see, like, the positive, or at least, you know, what we can take from it, or the good lessons, or the good traits that we take from it. And I would argue and say that you probably are empathetic and kind and understanding, and let us do our thing, and are trusting, and do assess us, and do kind of see in your own way, given what you went through.
Yeah.
You know, and then that allows us to be the same way. I can honestly say, I don't think that I would be the leader that I am had I not gone through what I went through. I don't think I would have that to reference or think about or understand innately. Like, oh, been there. Oh, I know what that's like. Oh, like, it just teaches you to be a different person.
I agree. I think it does.
Yeah.
But it's also easier to give empathy to the clients and to other people. But going back to the self-empathy, it's still,
So hard.
I'm still, struggling and learning to, take care of yourself. You're important too, not just the clients,
Absolutely.
But it is a learning process. There's no question about it.
Always.
And you'll never get it 100%.
Yeah, I think you had said at one point, I don't know if it was before I had Michael or after, but at some point you had said, like, almost like doing less damage. Like, you're always going to damage your kids. You're gonna.
It's going to be a different damage.
Less damage. Or different damage, right? And so I think about that, right? Of, like, how can I do less or differently? Or talk about how I made a mistake and own that, because I never had that.
And either way, it'll be a different.
It will be.
It'll be.
You're going to.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think what we've, like, talked about a lot in this podcast today is, like, how do I do my own work, regardless of if I was taught it, regardless if I know it, regardless of whatever. It's like, how do I reflect on, like, my own stuff so I can, like, change that and taking in that cultural piece and taking in that generational piece. Yeah.
The hard part for me when I started was looking in the mirror and seeing this person and going, wow, I don't even like that person. Who is that person? And then you start going through all the stuff that you've done in life, not bad things, but just treating people, relationships and stuff. And it goes through a very sad period, and you come out of it, and you learn how to have empathy for people around you, for your family, for clients, stuff like that. Yeah. But it takes time. And looking in the mirror, I think, is one of the hardest things. Absolutely. And you're literally just staring at yourself going, wow. You did that?
And it's a lifelong thing. Like, lifelong learning.
But you also have to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that's very difficult.
Yeah.
I can forgive you if you went and chopped somebody's head off. Very easy for me to have empathy and forgive you, but, look at yourself and it's like, no, can't do that. So.
And so, like, to speak on, like, that makes you such a great leader, like, that piece of, like, empathy is, like, there's never been a time, I think, what is it, let our family lead yours? Mm-hmm. It's like, there is such a piece within this company of, like, and I think I talked about it actually with Alex, like, your clinician, right? Of this piece with, like, family doesn't have to suffer. Like, you have your job, and this is really important work that we do, but still show up for all of the things, right? So, like, Alex was, like, struggling with going to, like, her kids' graduation, right? It's kindergarten or whatever.
Get yourself to graduation.
She was like, I'm not going to go. It's only that. And I was like, go.
You have to go.
You have to go. Yeah. And then you, like, sponsored Michael's soccer, team.
But you have to
and
enjoy
it's, like,
those moments.
and you have that part in all of us. So we're not scared about, like, I have to do this this like grind piece because of the work that we do is so important. Yes, and I have to take care of myself, and it's because you've created this culture of that we're not scared to take care of ourselves and take care of our families and still show up and suit up and do the work that we do. And so that trickles down from you, Steve, like so immensely through everyone. I've never met one person in this company who knows you, right, that doesn't have that experience with you. So it's so funny when you said that. I was like, that's shocking to me that you don't think you're this amazing leader. And I think part of, I think you can take things positive or negative, but I think we're tending towards the negative or the positive of, because you're so like get to the solution, it helps move things along. Yeah. Because we can sit there and talk about all the emotions and the this and the that and the pros and cons versus like, hey, this is what it is. It does.
I'm like, I've always kind of been that way, but I definitely take that more from you and Sharon. Like, as I'm leading, I'm like, okay, well, what are we doing? Right. Where are we at? Okay, even with like big changes coming up, I'm like, okay, so what are we doing? Like, we gotta keep going, and we can't really stop. And if that's bulldozing right now, and then like figuring out everything out, then that's what we're gonna do.
Talk about it.
Well, the decision we just made about that one program, it took months and a lot of analyzation, looking at numbers. It was still a very difficult thing to do, and to do it when you were on vacation was even harder.
We have this running joke that they're like, because this is now like the third time that I take like a lengthier vacation, and I come back to some news. Like every time, I kid you not, they're like, my team, as soon as I walked in the door, they're like, so Carla, I'm like, what? Like, they're like, I think something's going on. Like, and I'm like, okay. And I was like, hi, Sharon, welcome back. And she was just like, yeah, you're not allowed to go on vacation anymore. I'm like, okay. Yeah, but I mean, we just keep chugging along.
It's just hard decisions sometimes feel like bulldozing. Yeah. Because they're very hard to make, and they hurt a little bit. And you feel like you let some people down.
There you go. I think it's because you also have the emotional capacity to understand that this, like, it's a business, but I'm a person, and these are people, and we're not dealing with products. So it's like I'm empathetic. And that's a hard decision to make, even though it's a calculated and logical and well thought out one. I have to do it despite the fact that I feel about it. And that's also, I think, a strength. Like, emotions are great. Let's talk about them all the time, but they're not going to run your life, So I think all good things.
All good things.
Well, this was an amazing discussion.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you guys for coming.
Having this space with y'all.
Thank you for talking and all your input. It was wonderful.
Generational trauma might shape us, but it doesn't have to define us. If this conversation resonated with you, or if you're ready to start your own healing journey, visit laventanatreatment.com or reach out to our team.